Well, I was just thinking, I brought several black T-shirts with me because I don't know what I'm trying to do, but I wore a black T-shirt.
Trying to be Steve Jobs?
Well, honestly, I didn't want to think when I packed. It was like jeans and black T-shirts. I just wear black T-shirts every day when I'm sitting here in my mom's sewing room working. But now that we're using video, I'm thinking it's going to look like I didn't change for any episode because we've recorded several. So the guy wears the same, but it is what it is.
Well, that's like a brand, so you can just own that.
Yeah.
Now we believe you that it's clean.
I did laundry.
It's a fresh
seriously.
one.
Yeah,
I believe it. Hey, Loren, are you ready for another episode of Campus Confidential?
Very ready. I'm excited about today's episode. How about you?
Yeah, I'm ready. We're wondering if your internet is ready for it.
No, I'm not sure about that. That I cannot guarantee. It's been spotty today.
We are spotty. It is interesting how it decides to be spotty. But yeah, why don't you tell our listeners who our guest is today?
Yeah, Robin Hungerford, who I really didn't know well and really enjoyed spending time with. I know you know her well. But Robin has almost 20 years in the hospitality industry, the last 3 or so with a company called Webb Food Service Design, where she's a planning director. And prior to that, though, like you and I, is that right? You and I, yeah, that's right.
Is it you and I, or me and you?
Yeah, us.
I don't know. Us.
Like us. She spent 13, 14 years at the University of California, Riverside, as the Senior Director for Dining and Hospitality Services, where, by the way, she and her team won the Loyal E. Horton Award from NACUFS, the National Association of College University Food Services. That's the most coveted award, given to a dining department in the country. So really an accomplished hospitality leader there. And was in contract dining management before that for a few years. So really her whole career in the hospitality industry. Currently, I mentioned, works for Webb Design and does advisory work for campuses, master plans, operations, staffing analyses, all that kind of stuff. And is also a graduate of University of California, Riverside. And I would say she has a degree in psychology. I found her in our interview to be quite insightful to behavior and people. And so that psychology degree must still be at work.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a reminder that your degree can be used in many different ways.
Yeah,
I think she definitely puts it to use. She is one of the most self-reflective, insightful people that I know. And she spends a lot of time thinking about how she shows up, why she shows up, and how she can be better.
Yeah.
At life.
Yeah, I thought her self-awareness was tremendous. And what she covers in this episode, and I think people will hear, is all the little things that she does to be a better leader, and how much of what you need in leadership you can find within yourself. It's not to say she didn't talk a lot about mentors and others, but learning to trust your own judgment, learning to trust your own instincts and your own voice, I thought was a good reminder that sometimes we carry around with us what we need to be successful.
Yeah, we are what we need. Well, let's take a listen in. Robin, we're really excited to have you with us today. Thank you for saying yes.
Thank you for asking. I was honored.
Yeah. So, as we know, we're in the middle of our season here, and we really think a lot of folks in life and in jobs, we have chapters or ways in which we show up in different places and spaces. And so I think we want to start with you today is, what is the chapter that you're currently in life? What does it feel like for you? What are your priorities? All that.
Yeah. I'm really thankful for the chapter that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm in a chapter of trusting myself more than I ever have, and a chapter where I'm not looking for others to validate my worthiness. I think I'm sort of owning my worthiness myself, and that feels really good. And I think I'm in a stage where it's like I have these years of experience that are coupled with amazing mentorship that was poured into me. And now I'm like doing it. Like I'm using the experience, I'm using the mentorship, and I'm serving others. And so like all of that comes together to me in a way that's very fulfilling. I feel incredibly fulfilled by my work. I feel like the energy I'm giving work, I also receive that energy back from work. It doesn't mean every day's easy. I'm painting it like it's this beautiful picture. It doesn't mean every day's easy. I still get stressed out and freaked out and, still have those moments where I'm like, I don't know, am I good enough? But for most days, I just really feel like I'm walking in this really cool mix of purpose, passion, and curiosity. And I'm like sitting right in the middle of that. And that feels really good.
What were those three? You just mentioned curiosity. What were the other two?
Purpose, passion, and curiosity. So, sometimes people say, chase your passion. And some people will say, figure out your purpose. I've gone through chapters of my life where I felt like I was chasing passion. I went through chapters of life where I felt like I wasn't sure what my purpose was and I was trying to figure it out. And I think most recently, I came to appreciate leading with curiosity more, because the thing you're curious about, you're naturally going to also be passionate about and feel purposeful in. And so for me, it's like the intersectionality of those three things is what people should be striving for.
And in this moment of trusting yourself, did you just find yourself there, or are there things you did and that other people could do to reach this state of, I've arrived?
Yeah, great question. There's a whole lot of like heartache, tears, sweat, grind that sort of led me to this point. I think there has been the stage of, I don't really love the term imposter syndrome, but there's been a phase in my life, especially, I've always been in a male-dominated field. Why I chose that, I'm not sure, but I did.
And then I left. Chose you. Did you choose
I guess
it,
so.
or did it choose you?
That's a great point. I just went from one to the next, like one male-dominated field to the next. So there's been this stage in life where it was like I could be one of few women in the room. There was, I was the youngest in the leadership team in a room. I was the only one with little kids in the room. And so there's been these stages in my career where it was like, I need to work harder. I need to show that I'm valuable. I need to be validated by the room that I'm in. So there was that stage, and then recognizing that's actually not true. There's far more power in just finding value in yourself and not looking for it in the noise of the world. And so there was like there's definitely been stages in my life where I've had to figure that out. And that has come with ebbs and flows of I'm good enough, I'm not good enough. I want to try something new, but what am I capable of? Like there has been a variety of those points in life. Then there's been seeking out mentorship for me. And I think mentors need to both lift you up, but also hold a mirror up for you. So you can figure out what you need to work on and also what you're good at. I think I do a lot of self-reflecting. I think that's probably the number one thing a lot of leaders are missing, is taking time to be self-aware and self-reflect. I mean, I'll leave meetings or a day on campus and I'll sort of, when you get back to the quiet of your room or your hotel room, your home, how did I show up today? Could I have said that better? Do I think I connected with people? I mean, I ask those questions every day. I do it with my husband. I do it with my kids. Like after a conversation with my kids, could I have said that better? Do I think I conveyed my point? Do I think they understood it? Did I listen? Do I understand how they felt? I just think there's been a lot of growing and learning and failing and trying again anyway, and recognizing that it all works out at the end of the day. That's led me to today. That's led me to how I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in asking those questions, has there ever been a moment, or is there a time that's particularly impactful that someone gave you the feedback that you didn't show up well, it didn't land with them well, it was hurtful or disrespectful, or we can list any of the words, but is there a moment where someone gave you actual feedback that kind of gave you that pause or that you can remember?
That's a great question. I think never hurtful and never that part of it. I really am. I probably overthink like my delivery to people to sort of try to make sure it shows up in a respectful way. I think I got some feedback really early in my leadership years from a mentor that I really disliked. And I'll share what it is, but I really disliked it at the time. However, as time went on, I think I understood it more. And it was all at the core of it around listening more. But the way that it was delivered was you think really fast. So before the question's even out of someone's mouth, you're like ready to answer it, but it doesn't give the rest of the room the ability to come along with you. And so she was very sweet. She's like, I want you to let 3 people talk before you talk. I was like, what?
You're like, no.
Yeah. I'll meet you in the middle too.
Yeah. I mean, it was very practical advice, but I was very young in my leadership years at the time. And I was like, I don't like that. I'm a competitive person. I'm not. So there was moments early on where I realized that my growth was going to be just as much of how I pour into others as I show up sort of as myself. And I think at the end of the day, that's what she was teaching me. Like, I need to listen. I need to hear others. I need to make sure that we all feel a part of the process, that it actually is collaborative. It didn't take me long to sort of dissect that and then see the value in it. Just initially when she said it, I was like, what? I don't like this feedback. Like, I'm not loving this right now. I remember going home and talking to my husband about it. I mean, this was a long time ago. She's retired now, and I'm going to tell her about the podcast. She'll laugh when she hears the story. But I realized it's like going from management to leadership. It wasn't about how I managed a situation. It's sort of how I participated in the leadership of that situation. And I think that turning point for me professionally is then what started to open up so many more doors. Because it wasn't about managing or being the one in charge. It was more about leadership, taking care of the people I was responsible for, taking care of the people that were in the room with me. And I think that changed. That changed me as a leader and has kind of shaped who I am. I know that seems like very basic advice from her. There's been more advice she poured into me that was related to that. But I think there's moments when I realized, okay, I want people to respect me, but how am I showing respect for them? And listening has a lot to do with that, and making sure everyone's participating in the conversation. Everybody feels like they have a voice. So I think there was aspects about that in my younger years that I feel like I had to learn from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I've gotten similar advice. It was, you have to meet people where they are. I was like, no, people need to meet me where I am. Come along.
Yeah.
Get up here.
Yeah.
But to your point, it was actually taking that and using that advice and thinking about where people are and meeting them where they're at. Then we can all move forward together. Seems very critical to leadership. Have you always, I mean, you said male-dominated roles, you've kind of went from one to another, but when you were younger and you think about what you wanted to do when you grew up, is this anywhere near that? Or what did you want to do?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So initially, if you asked like 12-year-old Robin what she thought she wanted to do, I said I wanted to be a lawyer. And there was somewhere around my high school years that my mom planted this thought in my mind that lawyers, like most lawyers, aren't trustworthy or like honorable people. Like, she planted this thought in my head. I was like, oh God, I can't have a career my mom doesn't respect. And gosh, parents, be careful. How, you plant one little thought and your kid's like, what am I going to do with my life? So then, interesting pivot, I was going to pursue psychology. I have always been fascinated with how people think, I've just always been fascinated with the mind and differences in personality, et cetera. So then in college, I had my favorite professor teaching a class on the styles of psychologists. Loved it, loved this class. And this one particular day, she's talking about a style of psychology. And I'm like, this is it. This is the type of psychologist I want to be. And I'm getting amped. Like, yeah, I found it. This is the thing I'm going to do with my life. And then she's like, and this style really isn't used anymore because people don't respond to it well in today's times. And I'm like, oh boy, all right, that's not going to work out. And then I kind of felt like I wasn't sure. And so fast forwarding the story a little bit, I got my first sort of job in college in the food service world, and which happened to be my husband. My husband hired me, and I realized I loved it. And so I got my first sort of career leadership position with Compass Group when I was still in college. I hadn't graduated yet. I was sort of balancing full-time work, going to school full-time, sort of first management role in a large company. And I realized I loved it. And I was like, okay, well, maybe, sometimes careers come together in a way that you don't envision. And I thought, okay, it's kind of speaking to all the things for me. It's speaking to people. It's speaking to leadership, business. I like the entrepreneurial side of it. I like the number side of it. It's so hard to make money in the restaurant industry. I loved the challenge of managing a budget and hitting numbers and figuring out how to do that creatively. And then I loved serving people and making guests feel good and putting smiles on their faces when you just did a little something special on their plate and it just made them feel so good in the moment. And so it was like all of those things for me was like, well, okay, maybe this is the career. And even then I didn't think it was a lifelong career. I thought, okay, this is the direction I'll head in for a while. I love all of the things this offers. And so it's just evolved into the various positions I've had. And I've loved that journey all the way through. So I definitely didn't say I'm going to be in the food service world.
It's interesting you talk about, I fell into this too. I took the LSATs, was on my way to law school. I thought it was a good thing. My mother said, you love arguing so much, you should go to law school. So for me, it was an encouragement, not a dissuasion. But fell into a career in hire too. And there were times like you where I thought about leaving and didn't, but eventually did to the role I'm in now. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that transition. What then led you to think, oh, I could do some of these things I love in a different way? And what would listeners need to know about the differences, in higher ed versus adjacent to higher ed, or looking or helping higher ed from the outside? Can you just offer some comments and observations about that change and what you see now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think seeds get planted that can sort of lead to something. And so the seed with Webb, my transition to Webb, it started back when I was actually Webb's client. And they had won a couple of design projects at UCR when we were going through a period of tremendous growth, lots of building, lots of plans for future growth of enrollment, future growth of housing beds, et cetera. And one night we were doing a night walk in the building, and one of the owners of Webb asked me, do you plan to be UCR forever? And I said, no. I immediately said no. And it's not that I had a plan to leave. I really didn't think that I would be at UCR forever. That wasn't the plan. And he was like, well, what do you think you would do? And again, just immediately without really thinking about it, I said, well, eventually I'll get into consulting. And he was like, okay, that was it. End of conversation. But a seed definitely got planted that day. So fast forward, going through the pandemic was the lowest point in my career. I'm sure that was a very low time for everybody. For me specifically, why it was so hard professionally is the amount of layoffs I had to do.
Yeah.
Changed me. It changed me in a lot of ways. And there was a couple of specific things during the pandemic where it really showed me that some of the service-based auxiliaries or service-based departments on a college campus don't always get the respect they deserve. It is academics first, 100%. But these other departments on campus, it's what makes the whole world of a campus work. You need all the pieces in order to take care of students. That started to make me want to be able to advocate for dining services departments in just a bigger way. And at that time, another mentor, I have so many mentor stories that really tell, it's so many reasons of why I am who I am today. He was like, I think it's time that you do something else. And I was like, the middle of the pandemic? Like what? Like, so this is a weird time to be telling me you're ready to go do something else. I was like, you're crazy. Like, at least I have a job, right? I could go take a leap right now and then be laid off 3 months later. Like, I don't know what you mean, go do something else. And so if you know disc profiling, he's a disc I, which is what Kelsey is. And so he's very much like, take the leap. Don't worry about if you fall. Like, and I need people like that in my life because I'm very risk adverse by nature. My personality is to be risk averse. And he was like, it's time. Like, it's time. Now, I was really like, I don't know. You're nuts. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, and that period was so full of unknowns. I just empathize with you a minute. I mean, there were so many unknowns to have one more that you could control. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It literally felt crazy, honestly, what he was saying. So with his encouragement, we sort of felt like, hey, let's just check in with Webb. Like, let's see what's going on. He's like, start with who you know. One conversation led to another. It led to going down and meeting with them. It led to maybe doing some consulting on the side as a subject matter expert because my passion for this industry is very much evident when someone talks to me about it. And that literally then led a couple of months later to, why don't we just create a position and you come?
Yeah.
Like, let's create what you want to do over here. And I was like, I'm not looking for anything. I love my higher ed job. I had my eyes on sort of a career trajectory there, but there was something inside of me that was like, this is a really amazing opportunity to serve the industry I do love in a bigger way, to maybe help advocate and educate on campuses on behalf of dining services in a way that sometimes those leaders can't.
Right.
And there was something very intriguing about that.
I get that.
Although I was rather scared. I was rather scared to sort of take an absolute leap. And in some ways for me, it's felt like starting a whole new career. I don't know, Kelsey, like a whole new book, not a chapter. Like in some ways I was like, I'm not sure this is a chapter. This might feel like a book change.
So let me ask you, Robin, what do you miss then about not being in higher education directly? And what do you love now about the role you have where you're, just help unpack those differences a little.
Yeah, I do miss leading a large team on most days. I had a large team, over 200 full-time employees and over 1,000 student employees at UCR. I loved student employees. I loved feeling like a mentor to students. I loved leading a team and feeling like I was doing my best every day to take care of them. Like, I missed the team part. I still talk to my UCR peeps on a regular basis. I'm actually going there after this, going to campus after this. So there's pieces of being connected, directly connected to a campus that I miss. Mm-hmm. For our projects, when I step onto a campus, it's like
home.
Like, it is. It feels like home. It gives me goosebumps. I get the energy going in my, I just feel excited. So I feel blessed and fortunate that I still get to experience that, but given the project work and the clients I serve now. But I do miss sort of just being a part of it every day. There was something special about it. But what I love now in this role at Webb is I am getting to help advocate with senior leaders on campus about the role dining serves. I am getting to advocate on really how the financials of dining works, and how a campus sometimes needs to understand those a bit more. I'm helping leaders when they feel stuck in how to evolve their program, solve a problem within their organization, get back to being creative and innovative, because it's been very hard post-pandemic. Operators have just been spinning their wheels now for like 5 years, and just barely some of them sort of starting to feel normal again. So I love to just be on campus and be a partner to them on, we can make a path forward. We can take our blinders off. Let's call things and see things the way they are. And let's see what problems we're trying to solve. Let's see what makes your campus special, what makes your students special. And then let's make a plan, whether it's how we show up in a design project or how I show up in a strategic plan, master plan, or how I do an RFP management project. All of those, I just get to be a partner now to so many people and try to solve problems on all of these campuses, not just my own campus I used to work on. And that's the really special part of this job for me. Like that's the part that's so fulfilling. Sure. The little basket that's back here on my shelf, I've got pins and stickers from all the campuses I visit. And I feel like I leave a little piece of me on every campus I go to. And when I say that, I don't mean in a selfish way. I mean like in a really like heartwarming way. I think about my campuses. When I see something that might help one of them a year later, I ping them like, hey, I just saw this thing. You should look at it. And now it kind of feels like that's my team still. Now my team's a little more spread out nationally and I'm not as directly connected to it, but I still have a team, which is really just the clients and the campuses we partner with.
Well, it's strategy work, consulting work, advisory work that I think of the same way. It's transformational rather than transactional. I mean, you're trying to, I think what you're describing, at least for me, is the contribution as a relationship as much as it is pieces of information or content or advice. You're in it with them. So I love that.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
It makes me think, I think it was yesterday, someone sent me an article from the Chronicle. It was some day this week, but it was another study, right? And more information and saying that people working on campuses are growing more and more weary, right? This isn't new. I think your story, I think Loren and I have similar stories from pandemic time. We were all in leadership roles, having to make hard decisions. It's not, I think it's a common thing for leaders, but folks that have made it through it are still on campus, doing the work, want to feel purpose-driven, are in a time where things you think they can't get any harder, and then they get harder. And so how are you, what is kind of your approach, or how are you showing up in partnership with those folks? Because I think sometimes it could be perceived that we're coming from, we're not in it every day anymore. So do you get it?
Yeah.
How do you really understand where I'm at? So how are you showing up with folks, or what are you seeing in that?
Yeah. I love that question. I think the first thing that is really helpful right now is myself and the strategic consulting team I've put together. We actually all left higher ed in the last 4 or 5 years. And so unlike maybe this exists in other consultancy firms, I don't know. I'm not saying it doesn't. There is something that's really helpful actually for them that I've worked in higher ed recently, rather than I worked in higher ed 15 or 20 years ago. Right? Because I think higher ed of 15 years ago was very different than higher ed of today. And so I do think there's a sense of feeling comfortable or immediately starting to build some trust when they do hear that I was recently on a campus. I actually went through the pandemic being on a campus. There's almost like this immediate
you get it.
Bond building of being able to sort of I can feel that I did feel your pain. So that's the first thing that I actually think is really helpful right now, and maybe just a bit of a differentiator of what we offer. But I think the other thing is giving them a safe space to just tell me how they're feeling is really important, because I think, if you're an executive director of a dining program, you're really careful how you sound when you're managing up, and you don't want to sound like you're complainy or whiny or losing hope. Like, I think some people are afraid to vocalize those emotions to their superiors. And so in our consulting role, there's a little bit of psychology in there. So it's still speaking to that part of my desire in life. It's giving people a safe space to talk. Like, what are you going through? How are you feeling? What are you frustrated by? What are you worried about? And actually, those things are incredibly important of how we weave them into the master plan, because how the team is feeling is going to be directly connected to whether this master plan gets life or it gets dust on a shelf. And I can't paint a beautiful master plan of doing all of the shiny things that you should be doing if the reality is that the team is in a very different mindset. And so I actually connect that very much in the strategic planning work that we do, of making sure that the first 1 to 2 year goals actually are speaking to and a reflection of this mindset of the team at current. And what's really great about being a consultant is then you do actually get to sort of advocate for that with the senior leaders that you're meeting with on campus.
Let me loop back. And by the way, I want to say too, I love you keep reinforcing this point about listening. And we talk sometimes about listening with a third ear. And to me, I mean, that may have meaning for different folks. It varies. But for me, listening with a third ear means the other person really feels heard, and that you're noticing the body language and the intonation and what's not being said and what's being said carefully. But there's a whole nother thing behind it that you better dig at later when you're private to really understand how to help. So thank you for that. That's I think it's a skill and a desire, regardless of the role, not just for consultants. I mean, in leadership roles, I think that's critical. You mentioned a little bit ago, you had this mentor that was commenting to you a little bit about being your fast thinker and letting three people speak first, right? Back to the listening point. I wonder if you could comment a little bit, like how, as your careers progressed and you had all these teams, and now, how do you actually invite feedback? And secondly, what do you think most leaders are afraid to hear? What are the things leaders need to hear but are afraid to ask or hear? So how do you solicit it? And then what do you think leaders are afraid to hear?
Yeah, those are, okay, all great questions. So I'm going to go back a little bit and then I'll bring it forward. That mentor that I'm speaking about, I think really helped me see the value in building a personal brand. And so I'm very thankful. It was sort of like young in my professional career. I understood the value of a personal brand, and everything that we do, say, how we listen, how we make people feel, all of those things speak to our personal brand. And when we were at UCR, we actually did a personal branding workshop.
Wow.
And this thing behind me, this word cloud behind me, we allowed everybody on the team to provide anonymous feedback on every person on the leadership team, on what they saw as their strengths and what they saw as their areas of opportunity.
Yikes, sounds
and
scary.
Then we gave everybody their word cloud. We gave everybody their word cloud. And my husband turned mine into that and gave it to me one Christmas with all the words. He didn't take the constructive words off. It's all my words. Because I think as a leader, we can only evolve into our true potential when we own all of it, when we own our strengths, when we own our areas of opportunity, and when we own how we see ourselves and how we own how other people see us. Like we have to sort of do the whole thing. So the way that I solicit feedback is actually becoming far more comfortable with that idea. And so my mentor, she worked for Starbucks at one point, had shared with me that she grew the most in her time at Starbucks because in every leadership meeting, at the end of a meeting, they all got to sort of critique one another, like give open and honest feedback in the room to one another. And that was a very critical point in her career where she grew a lot because she had to take all the feedback in, good, bad, and ugly. And so working for her and then my other mentor, I feel like I got a lot of feedback from them regularly. And even though at times that wasn't easy, gosh, it made me to who I am today. Getting both the praise and the constructive feedback. But the other thing that it does is it gets you a lot more comfortable with receiving and giving constructive feedback. So we tried to create a culture at UCR that was specific to getting folks comfortable with giving and receiving constructive feedback. And so if I fast forward to what that's done to me today, I think it's made me far more self-reflective. I think it's made me far more intentional of how I have a conversation with someone. I'm far more interested in getting to know someone's personality because then it changes how I communicate with that person to make sure that it's working for them. And I do ask for feedback. I ask my team for feedback. I created a process at Webb called check-in chats. Instead of performance evaluations, we have check-in chats. And I ask my team, is there anything that I'm doing that's not helping you right now? Is there any roadblock that you're experiencing that I'm missing that I should be helping with? My right hand, Leslie, who works for me at Webb, and she used to work for me at UCR, got to bring her along on this consulting journey. I know her very well, and I make sure that the way that I am leading and working with her speaks to what's important to her. And so I think if you get open with giving and receiving constructive feedback, it makes you a more intentional leader.
Yeah. And I found you have to, and what I'm hearing you say too, is you have to model it, you have to continually practice it, and you have to do it consistently. Because if you just say it at the end of one meeting, no one's going to say any words, right? So how do you set the stage? How do you consistently model it? And how do you do it over and over
Totally.
again?
Yeah. And how you keep pursuing, like listening to podcasts, reading leadership books, listening to leadership talks. Like the leadership journey is really, truly a journey. There's no end point if you're going to sort of be in a leadership role. And so I think in the last 3 years, I've done far more of thinking about how to connect with clients, how to connect with my team, how to connect with people in my personal life in a more meaningful way, and a greater emphasis on how we make other people feel matters. And so, I think the personal brand thing is a big thing for me. I think about that a lot.
Yeah. So tell us, we've heard a lot about what you have learned from others, mentor, what you do for others. And I will say from personal experience, from the moment I met you, I feel very seen, and it is something I pride myself in doing as well, right? Really seeing the other people. But how do you take care of yourself? Because it is, right? This is, you even said it, right? It all sounds like rainbows and unicorns maybe, or it's easy to do, but how do you take care of yourself to be able to do this work in a consistent way?
Yeah, that's actually probably been the hardest part of my professional journey in adulthood, that part. It's not something I'm great at, but it's something I'm working on. I've always found I think I've always wrapped my value up in achievement from a very young age. And my mom's a retired teacher. She used to say, you put far more pressure on yourself than we have ever put on you. Right. Like I always wanted straight A's. I was very achievement oriented, and I don't know why, because the reality is my parents were just very supportive parents. I never was raised like you have to get A's or you're a failure. I wasn't raised that way, but it's actually is how my mind worked. Except that part. Don't do that or we're not going to trust you. Totally. So I started that at a young age, and I failed to see in like my 20s, for example, I actually failed to see the detriment of it. And so it kept going professionally for me. Like my self-value was absolutely tied up in achievement. And so I worked 1 million hours. I grinded really hard. I tried to have kids while still rapidly building my career. And, I have some moments where I can think back of having like a 2-year-old. I get home from work and I lay down on the floor because I'm so tired. And my 2-year-old is next to me, and I've just got tears falling from my face because I don't know how to show up the way I want to all the time. So that's been a lesson for me professionally that I still fight every single day. So even when I took the position at Webb, I took 4 weeks off almost fully between leaving UCR and starting at Webb. So I could take time to think about, what do I want to bring with me and what do I want to let go of as I start this new chapter? Because I think that's really important. If we just go from chapter to chapter, then you bring the good and the bad with you. So there was multiple conversations in there with my husband, with myself, around what am I bringing with me and what am I leaving behind? And I've really tried the last 2.5, almost 3 years, I guess now, to show up better for myself and my family, and find that, I don't know if it's balance. I had someone else in our industry say it's more like a integration of life and work. I'm not sure exactly what the right words are, because we all say balance and we all struggle with balance. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Yeah. But I think it's just finding the trade-offs. If I have a week where I have to travel for 5 days, it's making sure that I am making time for my kids to pick them up from school on a Friday and go out for ice cream and be present in that moment. It's allowing myself to recognize when I'm hitting my cap, and I need to take a day of I need to chill, I need to rest, I need to give myself permission to rest. And that is an everyday battle. These are not things I'm not winning yet. I'm not winning yet at these things. I have people in my life. I've now surrounded myself that sort of hold me accountable. It's like almost an accountability check. I have a girlfriend who checks in on me. Are you taking care of yourself? How are you feeling? How's your stress level? Leslie on my team does that for me. She sort of checks me when maybe I'm spinning on something, and she can see that I'm doing that. But yeah, I'm trying, and I have the most amazingly supportive husband. So I think he can also see when I have overfilled my plate once again, and he tries to take things off of it to help me. But this is an area I think I will be battling this my whole life, because the inside voice says grind, work hard, win the next project, do the best work, and then you're valuable. And then I have to remind myself, no, I'm already valuable. It's not about how much work I do. So that's a constant battle. Well, this is, I think, the American workforce condition, and you've given voice to it. So thank you for that. May we all have a Leslie in our lives somehow to help us with that. Yeah. And, throughout this episode, you've talked, what I perceive is you work very hard at knowing thyself. And for example, your last comment about what I call residue. I've thought about this too as I've changed jobs. Okay, what's the residue that I need to leave behind? But if you don't do that self-awareness work, which you're talking about so eloquently, you kind of bring it along, and then you make it somebody else's residue too. So I just really appreciate today in this episode the self-awareness and the reminder to be thinking about that and to be reflecting on that. And you've offered so many kernels of wisdom, like knowing that you have in yourself what you need rather than trying to find that. And I think what you called the noise of the room, and how listening, which you've brought up over and over, is a way to show respect for other people. Sometimes I do too, need a little device. Count 3 people before I say anything in order to really show that I have that same challenge. And I appreciate you being really transparent with that. I love the value of personal brand, and this idea that to fully develop in that way, we have to be aware of all the ways that we present ourselves. So, and I guess the last thing I want to say is I hear in you a real generosity to your clients and to your family and really to us today and to the listeners. So thank you for your generosity and all of the ways you've shown up here with us today, to use Kelsey's words. Yeah. That was incredibly kind. Thank you for that very much.
Thank you, Robin.
Kelsey, Loren, are y'all ready for some extra credit?
Sure. Born ready.
Does not involve any kind of Southern food, so that's a good start for me being on the microphone. No, we actually did something a little different, and after we stopped recording the interview, Kelsey, you asked Robin for an extra credit question, which she would want to ask us if she could ask the extra credit question. So that's what I'm going to ask. Which, for the record, I don't know, because my internet cut out and I disappeared. So surprise to the listeners and to me.
Surprise, surprise.
Kelsey's had about 6 minutes to plan ahead of Loren. So that's what we were working with right now.
And in full disclosure, I haven't thought about it at all. I should have paused. Self-reflection.
No, okay. It's a good question though. So I'll kind of boil it down to her question being, what are you hoping that people are taking away from the podcast that keeps you doing it? She was talking about how we're now on year 4, talking about getting back to our roots with the way we're kind of doing these episodes, going back to season 1. So what do you hope people are taking away from this that keeps you wanting to continue recording this podcast? Kelsey, do you want to go first since you had the advantage of 6 minutes?
Sure. Well, my head starts to think about her point around internal validation versus external validation. I think for me, it's validating and fulfilling to just be in conversation with people. It's one of my most favorite things to do. It's the best part of my job. And so to be in conversation with smart, fun people and be able to share it with others feels very validating for me. What I hope other people are getting out of it is that sometimes you just need a little pick me up or a little insight from other folks. So I hope that our conversations and the value we're getting is translatable through people listening. And when people send little messages or comment on something that we've said or a guest has said and we've talked about, it's just, that to me is all the validation I need. It feels great and it feels rewarding and beneficial.
Good answer.
How about you, Loren?
Well, this is typically me. I have two answers.
Okay.
One is just leadership's tough. I loved it. This doesn't mean it's not fulfilling, but when you have responsibility for people's lives and careers and the politics that go on around, et cetera, it's hard. And so one of the things I hope people take away is just sort of this, I don't know, it's kind of like group therapy, just this like, okay, other people got this too. I'm not the only one. I'm not as alone on this journey as I think. So just a little bit of that community of other people facing the same things you are. That's one. The other is, practically speaking, just a tip, something you can try, a question you can ask an employee that might elicit something you need to hear, or a technique that would help you do something and fresh it up a little bit, just a little thing that you never thought of. I get those all the time. I don't lead the kinds of teams that I once did where I could use those in the same way, but almost every episode I hear one thing, I'm like, oh, that's a good thing to try. So a community and a tip would be things that I hope people get.
I love that. A nugget people can walk away with, for sure.
Yeah.
Corey, why do you keep doing this with us?
Because you keep forcing me to come back. No,
because I keep forcing you to go. No, well, it's interesting. I'm going to let you answer, but okay. I was in a conversation today. Someone was asking me for stats or just a little bit of like highlights of how we were kind of setting the standard for maybe a conversation or a podcast for other industries. In Compass. And I had to say, I go, it's actually a lot of work. I think I've had conversations with folks and they're really excited about it. And then I'm like, okay, well, here's like the 15 things you need to do. And I don't think anyone started a podcast. No. So I'm super
had more conversations with people. And they're like, maybe not then.
Yeah. Right. So I'm super grateful for you. So why do you keep doing this?
No, I think it's similar to the things that both of you said. The reason I keep doing it is I think the same reason. I think what we're hoping people take away from it is like, I learn a ton because I'm relatively new in my leadership journey as well. I've been managing a team for maybe 4 or 5 years now, and never had really a management role before that. And so even though I don't work in the high ed space, I still learn a ton from these people that we're interviewing, and I walk away while we're recording, jotting down notes or kind of scribbling things down and taking things later too. So that's why I want to keep doing it, is because I'm learning along with the audience and with y'all as we're doing it. And I think this, we've talked about this before too. I think this podcast can be especially valuable for young leaders because we're getting to talk to people who have had so many different experiences and seen so many things, and help young leaders kind of understand how to navigate those things that to us are unfamiliar or we have never seen before. So I selfishly, I just really enjoy sitting down and trying to soak all the wisdom and everything I can get out of these podcasts. But I do love it because it is higher ed focused, but so many of the things we talk about and hear and the nuggets and the wisdom that we hear are pretty universal to regardless of what industry you're in. We're all dealing with a lot of the same issues. And I take a lot away from it.
That's awesome.
Yep. Thank you. We're glad you're on this journey with us, Corey. And actually, the young leader comment, I could have used this podcast early in my career, actually still can use it, but could have used it especially. And I hereby declare my apologies to all those listening for whom I was a horrible leader. earlier in my career. I could have used a little more help. So,
yeah, please forgive us. We did the best we could with what we had. I think that's a reminder. You do the best we can with what you have. So, well, until next time, we'll get some more nuggets. Thank you.
Campus Confidential is presented by Compass Group, produced by Corey Inscoe, with your hosts Kelsey, Harmon, Finn, and Loren Rullman.